Here we are in Glasgow, in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, and I don't have even a whiskey. But luckily for you, dear audience, we have a couple of great people here. We have Proscriptor, and we have the other guy. No, just kidding aside, this is Zemial, and we're going to talk about some Greek black metal. So, here we are, guys. How are you doing?
Really well, until you rocked up.
How about you, sir?
Exceptionally well, thank you very much.
How, in your opinion, the show went? You just did a kind of a atypical show in terms of what people are usually expecting to see on the stage.
Well, this is my third appearance with Zemial, as I've known this gentleman for almost 3 decades now, and this has been a long-term objective of ours to collaborate with one another on a musical level. And the show went fairly well. There were a couple of misfires and some imperfections, but I know that all of our executions, as far as the quartet is concerned, it was guided in a very positive sense. So overall, the performance was exceptionally well.
All right, that's good to hear. So, Vorskaath, that is your artistic name. Vorskaath. Can we start with the story behind this name? You've been here in the 30 years. What's the story behind the band name and your artistic name?
Just things that I found represented me at the time. I mean, I was a teenager when I started this band, and Zemial stands for the adversary, which is something that still fits perfectly in my philosophy. I don't like to go with the mainstream. I question things in the way that I do things, in the way that they're presented, and I make my own choices. That still remains. The band reflects that perfectly well. I have no interest in going along with the flow. I never have. And Vorskaath is a name that I felt was quite suitable phonetically for what I was doing at the time. And yeah, of course, certainly, I was very influenced by Bathory at the time, so I wanted something Bathory sounding. And that's all there is to it.
You've been there, like I said, 30 years, which was before. This is just for the younger audience to understand that Norwegian black metal came pretty much like early 90s with the so-called second wave black metal, and you were ahead of that stuff. There was Bathory and other bands doing the first wave, but soon after you were like there, and you, among others, made Greek appear on the map, Greece appear on the map. So how was it possible that suddenly a place like Greece is there to just create black metal, like, hey, we get the head start and let's start doing it?
There's a very long answer to that, because there isn't a single reason. You know, obviously you need to see things socially, what's happening socially to any kind of place. Why did the British dominate rock and heavy metal for decades? You know, what was happening here? And similarly, I guess there was just an unrest in Greece at the time, and it could be a result of a number of things, from the political situation in Greece or the religious situation in Greece, and teenagers that were in a position to be able to see that and distance themselves from it, as well as the advent of, you know, thrash metal coming there in the 80s, which was massive, you know, and very influential. And at the time, I guess most of us, I would think most of us, we were just fans, you know. We were doing music not as musicians, but as fans. So we were essentially playing the music that we really liked listening to whilst growing up. And I think that was the sentiment all over. Now, as to this happening so early on, I really don't think there's anybody that can really pinpoint it. Like I said, it's the sum of all the factors that led to that. And there you have it. Greece is, you know, one of those important countries in doing that. Except that we had no media. The Norwegians handled themselves, except for writing great music, which they did.
And also church arsons and whatnot.
Which was the next point. They handled their media really well. There was nothing like that to handle in Greece. And you couldn't do that in Greece because a Greek prison wouldn't be compared to a Norwegian prison.
I can imagine.
You know, okay, Midnight Express.
Everybody should watch that film, by the way. Now I'm going to take it to you, Proscriptor, because you have also had your own, let's call them, endeavors in black metal from early on. You were there with creating Absu and other projects as well. And so you were there to witness the whole kind of a black metal creation in the American continent. What made you to find this music style and jump on it by yourself?
Well, as a young child, I was always actually at the age of 3 in 1977. And having an older brother who was 8.5 years older than me, I was immensely astounded by hard rock music and the early stages of heavy metal music due to my older brother and also my stepfather, who was a very notorious drummer back in the late 60s and early 70s, who actually turned me on into pursuing the percussive outlets that led me to be a drummer vocalist to this day. It led to that, and then by the mid-'80s I was fascinated by a heavy punk movement, and then by the time I relocated to Texas in the mid-'80s, I had become comrades with Equitant and Shaftiel, who later became stalwart members and the classic Absu lineup in the whole 90s decade. So once we started to build a strong, stalwart camaraderie together, we had discovered thrash, but also discovered a very specific, very special type of Teutonic thrash from a country of Germany, and with bands like Darkness, Creator, Destruction, Sodom, Minotaur, Necronomicon, as well as Slayer, Sacrifice from Canada, Bulldozer from Italy, Necrovore from Texas. These bands of pure, dark, evil, and fast tempos is really what planted the seed to form Absu, and also the love of Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Assyrian mythology and Thelemic magic and ceremonial magic. So the concoctions of all the aforementioned topics that I talked about is really what brought Absu together. But I was kind of an outcast at during that particular time, because I was such a stalwart fan of 60s psychedelic rock, 70s progressive music, and a lot of late 70s, early 80s hard rock. So I think that my diverse influences kind of created a twist for Absu's music. And before our first album, I told the other gentlemen in the band that I wanted to classify the sound as mythological occult metal, being a concoction of speed, death, blackened forces, traditional heavy music, and progressive music, and to combine it all together, but to add my own twist, calling it mythological occult metal. And the origin behind my pseudonym being Proscriptor is to prescribe the words of the dead in a requiem, which is Latin based. And since I am the chief lyricist and the poetic advisor behind Absu, that's how I formulated my pseudonym.
That was a really long answer.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
okay,
you.
how did
Good
you end
evening.
up doing music with Zemial?
We had been in contact ever since 1992 and shared a lot of 91. Well, with Equitant 91, but the two of us we came in contact in 1992 and shared a lot of same interest with his influences, our vast adoration with progressive music. But at that time, when Absu was taking a turn and really finding the apex paramount point of finding our particular niche style, Absu was a heavy follower of the Greek movement back then, especially with Zemial and Agathis, Rotting Christ, Verathron, Necromantia.
Basically all the Greek names.
I mean, Twilight, Nightfall, we were all such good comrades back then, but There was only one band that had a special pinch in the formula, a special niche in the recipe, and it was Zemial. And we had always talked about collaborating on a musical level one day, and almost 3 decades later, here I am, and so fortunate to be proud and to be associated with this project.
In a perfect world, this would be a perfect stop to stop this interview, because it is a beautiful story, like a fairy tale. But because this is a Rauta channel and I'm kind of a screwed up guy, we're not going to stop here. But now we're starting to start deeper. Now it's actual time for actual interview. Now let's define Zemial by lyrics, ideologies, politics, everything, religions. Where is Zemial standing on or in?
Always on the outside.
What lies outside? What is beyond?
Look, the outside is symbolically anything outside the circle, anything outside the norm, anything outside what is bright and known, okay? I think traditionally a musician, a bard in ancient times, was that part of the tribe, that person of the tribe that was outside of the community, experimenting and bringing those experiences through art, through music, around the campfire to teach. Art is the kind of thing that you always necessarily create outside, not inside. Not inside the confines of a standard society, or which is probably the reason why we have such a machine of creating art and music these days. And to me, having been brought up with what I think is great music, in the rock genre and beyond, classical music, jazz, everything, you always find that good music is inspirational because it removes you from the safe zone. It removes you from the mundane. It removes you from the everyday environment that you're used to. And that is where I like to operate from. So I take my time. I really contemplate what I want to do. And I have no desire to be in, as you can see from the way that I do things.
So you're kind of a outcast by selection.
Yes, absolutely.
So what about the lyrics? How would you describe them to the audience who are like, okay, now I found this band called Zemial, but I don't know anything about the lyrics, what they are all about, in your opinion, in your words?
Well, it varies. The topics vary greatly. One of the consistent elements that are used in Zemial was Sumerian mythology and cosmogony and so on, which is one of the things that
bind you together.
Yeah, exactly, correct. Which is one of the great things that we realized about each other very early on, that we had that connection right there. But it now goes beyond that for me, because that element, the way that human consciousness operates outside of the square, symbolically is to be found in every culture. And I like to delve into that aspect when writing lyrics. So in essence, creating journeys for the listener, which may be fantastical on one side, but may be symbolically guiding on the other side. And it very much, in my case, deals with darkness, because darkness is not something that has a connotation of good or evil. In fact, I think darkness is the kind of element, it's the kind of experience that human beings ought to familiarize themselves with, because it is that place where you grow. Because darkness is symbolizing that which is unknown, and only when you enter into that frame of mind of exploring beyond your known limits into what is entirely dark can you bring your own light into that space and receive something beyond what you've already known. So that concept, and both symbolically and in a way directionally, is what I like to give to the listener. And the more time goes by, the more I realize for myself that I create music that has that I think requires the listener separates himself from the group, because heavy metal is very much, and for good reason, associated with a group of people. You listen to heavy metal and you all sing together and so on, but great music is something that all of us experience on our own, and I think that's missing from today's world. So I like to do that, and that is that dark element, that darkness is the main thing that I find I pour out into Zemial.
So you started basically a black metal band. That is how you're defined anyway by outsiders. But in usually, I mean, like, for example, if you look at the metal archives, you're mentioned as like black metal early, and nowadays you're more like progressive combination of heavy metal, thrash metal, black metal, all those styles. And when I was listening to you on stage, I could totally kind of agree with the statement. You had so many heavy metal elements, like some of those riffs are clearly like pure heavy metal, but there are these layers which just remove you from the kind of a standard heavy metal, which is known as the mainstream music. My point and the question is, how did you decide to go into that direction, or was it just something that was about to happen automatically?
Yeah, it's a bit of both actually. For the majority of what I've done with this band, I've wanted to operate within a thrash metal genre and a black metal genre, so to speak. Black metal, well, Bathory and Celtic Frost were my prime influences, okay? And Destruction, Sodom, and so on. So I operated in that level to begin with. But as time went on, I decided that I really wanted to let go of a frame and to just create music. As I said, I found that dark element to be the main characteristic of Zemial, not the music. It's that feeling. And I found that I could do that by combining different genres and not necessarily having a particular sound. It's not black metal or thrash or whatever.
So you're not basically limiting yourself?
Not at all. Why should you?
I don't know, some people choose to do it.
And for whom?
That's a good question. Which brings me to the next question. I need a comment from you as well, but hold on a bit. The thing is, you create all the music, and on stage you are the drummer. But it seems like Proscriptor here is also a talented drummer. Do you have a kind of a like, let's change idea, or do you have a competition of sorts, like who is the more skilled or who can be more versatile or crazy about drums? What are your thoughts about it?
It hasn't even crossed my mind.
Because it crossed my mind. I was watching your drumming and I know that he's a really good one. I said, you are like, how do these guys compete?
Well, you've just brought that to my attention for the first time. I would adore to have, 2 drum sets and both of us playing and singing. That would just be the ultimate. But in the scene that we operate in, it's exceedingly difficult to just support my drum set. Asking people to provide 2 drum sets for Zemial would be just an impossibility. I've never thought of competing because if just when you mentioned it, the first thing that I thought of would be complementing.
Yeah, exactly.
How could we create something awesome together? I would never have thought of how do I compete or how do I... I don't have that. I'm not so insecure, man. I know what I can do, what I can't do, and I'm pretty comfortable with that,
Kind of a perfect guy.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take it to you because I saw you play with Absu in Finland a few years back, and I was still already wondering, like how can you handle this technical approach and still sing at the same time? And now that I noticed also that you were doing it also, and I'm wondering, okay, these guys have a lot of similarities, not only these Sumerian topics and all, but also this kind of a maniac approach to playing with percussion and all that stuff. So there must be some kind of competition. Now, I know your answer. I need now know yours. How do you feel this kind of approach that you're operating on the same field with drums and singing?
Well, once again, I feel that that's a strong aesthetic network that I have amongst myself with Vorskaath is we share a lot of the same interests, adorations for music, drumming, the same bands, magic and mythology, especially on a spiritual and metaphysical level. I mean, there's no competition involved, but I mean, as far as myself being a drummer and vocalist, for me, it's always started out being a drummer. Then I always had a vast passion for being a vocalist. And during the early days of Absu, the previous employees / candidates in the band didn't fruitfully meet my expectations as far as the delivery, because I feel that syllabically on a cadence level it has to be spot dead on with the percussive patterns. Being the drummer, being the chief lyricist, I thought it made most logistical sense to actually sing and drum on a simultaneous level. And being the lyricist and being the drummer, I find it, and I think he can agree with me as well, that I find it very elementary and very easy because, you know, a lot of people say that the drumming, percussive aspect behind the music is the heartbeat, and the vocals is the blood pumping through the vascular system to parade the heartbeat in a simultaneous fashion. So that's always been my principal thought and ideology behind drumming and singing in a simultaneous mode.
So you don't feel like singing simultaneously is slowing you down or restricting you in terms of being kind of a technical and whatnot?
No, it's just made me more maniacally insane, especially in a live aspect, because I am crazy.
That's good to have a crazy person, because crazy people are usually the more creative ones. Now, that brings me to the next question before we have to call it quits. You have quite a different stage approach. I mean, your cape, your headband, your sleeves / gloves. Why to choose this way, which is gonna make people raise their eyebrows?
That's because I am a certified member of an OTO chapter in Texas called the Southern Biscuit Community, and I'm a strong follower of thelemic magic and Gnosticism. So what you see as far as my apparel, choreographical approach, and how I'm projected on stage is who I magically am.
So you're a wizard on stage.
Well, yeah. I mean, I always have been ever since I've delved into hallucinogenic drugs at a very young age. But I project my magical self, being the Magus that I am, in a reincarnated past, present, and future life. So it's what you see in a choreographical sense is what I project on stage with Zemial.
All right. How does this reflect on you? How does that kind of resonate with you, that you have this kind of a magnificent star, which is very atypical for music, metal music in general, but also in the terms of you being atypical metal band in so many ways? Is that key essence or just some nice coincidence?
You said it yourself, man, and it goes without saying from everything that I've told you so far, I'm not looking for safety. I'm not looking for sales. I'm not looking for being in. When we decided to do this together, I didn't want to say to Proscriptor, I want you to do this and that and that. In fact, I said to him, I would really like us to collaborate in a way that would project your personality, because we're not playing together so we can name drop or do, things like that.
You're not all-star, superstar band.
I do not view. He's a friend, you see?
Yeah, of course.
That's why we're playing together. So, as I see him, I feel good seeing him do that on stage, because that's my friend right there doing what he feels like. And what I do is I create the context in which he can express himself. That's great.
And plus, it's such a natural ability, because this is only I'm only 3 shows deep in a live aspect, being in this band, and every time I've been on stage rehearsing and playing in a live atmosphere and aspect, I feel like I've been in this band for over 30 years. It's beyond natural, the most natural thing, and it's projected natural science that is transpired and transformed into euphonic magic.
All
Period.
right. Cool. Now it seems that our time is soon due, so
It's already been over several times.
several times. That what always happens. What lies ahead in Zemial future? Let's project into maybe 5-10 years.
Yeah, right, sure. I've got a new album out. Oh, no, I don't have it. Sorry, I should say that again. I have a new album prepared. As soon as we return to Greece, I'll start recording, because I've done the pre-production for the whole thing. Proscriptor will be doing vocals on a big part of it, and that is Zemial's return to thrash. It's 30 years since the band started, and I felt that I could go back to the things that inspired me to start this band to begin with, and look at what I can do today with those same inspirations. And I think this is going to be something that a lot of people that have known Zemial from very early on will appreciate, because it's going to be lean and mean. Now, that's album number 1. At the same time, I've composed album number 2, which is complete, and it consists of 3 pieces. One of them has both of us doing vocals. It's as out there as anything I've ever done, but it is distinctly metal, except that it's perhaps unusual. It's called, the second album is already titled, and it's completely ready for recording and production, and I would like that to be out in 2 years from now. And I have 2 other albums ready as well. One of them is Lurking, and this has been ready for years, and it's a complete progressive rock thing, and the other one is called Aeon. Now, I'm not sure if they will ever be released under the banner of Zemial. I'm contemplating that, because it's a huge departure. It's a great leap. So at this point, what I want to do is just release that thrash album, get on the road with the guys. We have a band that's really ready. First of all, like you just heard, we feel great on stage with each other. The only rehearsal we've ever done was in the United States, when we sat down for breakfast and we noted some things down. The rest of it has just locked in. We feel really great with each other. We have a really great understanding of how to move forward, how to deal with difficult situations, with challenges, how to make decisions. It's as if we've been working on this for a long time. We want to do the album, get out, play as much as possible, get around as much as possible, come back, do the second album, and just keep going. And staying outside of the box, man. The best I could hope for is that the people that listen to this music would find a certain enjoyment that is just outside of the main kind of meal they're being served all the time. That's great for me.
Words of wisdom to the audience.
March forward, never look back.
What about you, sir? Those words of wisdom to the audience.
I would say keep dreaming and keep coming back up. Don't stop. No matter what people think, you need to do the thing you feel comfortable with. Why? Because you're only going to live once, and you don't want to go with regrets. So just do what you love doing, and no matter what, keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now it's me pretty much speechless. Well, that's not kidding. I have nothing more to add to say that. Think about these words and think about this comradeship, this kind of a brother from another mother kind of a thinking these two great gentlemen have, and then you have it on your road towards creating your own music, own band, fulfilling your dreams, and the rest. That's all from Rauta this time. Have a good night and take care. Thank you so much. A lot of talk. I could have talked to you once again like a few hours more, but it's only past 30 minutes. So.